At the beginning of July, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines was responsible for the security of FSB Russell and the surrounding terrain generally enclosed by the north-south grid lines XD 86 and 96, and the east-west grid line 58 extending all the way to the southern boundary of the DMZ. On the second day of July, 2nd Platoon was ambushed during a search and destroy patrol. Several men were badly wounded and 2 killed, PFC. David Vorenkamp from Comstock, Michigan, and Lance Corporal Richard Crudo from East Meadow, New York. Our platoon was immediately sent to help, but we lost 4 Marines to heat exhaustion as we rushed to assist them. Fortunately, 3rd Platoon would arrive to help. We were told to stand down. It was another terrible day in Vietnam, and we had to medevac all 4 of our Marines. On July 14, Operation Herkimer Mountain was terminated, and the battalion commenced search and destroy activities in the northern sector of the Arlington Canyon operation. Earlier in April, whispers swirled that President Nixon's inaugural troop withdrawal would finally deliver us from Vietnam's grasp. Yet, as the months dragged on, the promise of freedom seemed as distant as a mirage in the jungle heat. By August, the 9th Marine Regiment jubilantly packed up for Okinawa, leaving the rest of us to stew in limbo. It wasn't until mid-November that our long-awaited extraction staggered into existence, and the agonizing delay gnawed at whatever shred of morale we had left. Picture gearing up for a swift ticket home, only to linger in endless purgatory. Ultimately, hope gave way to grim resignation. Survival boiled down to the brutal simplicity of killing or being killed, a cruel punchline to the dark comedy of bureaucracy that left us marooned in the madness. During the crucible of summer, a singular moment emerged, one that would permanently alter the fate of 1st Platoon, Golf Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. It was an event so profound it resonated through the core of the brotherhood we had meticulously built. That was the day a Marine arrived, a man whose presence would leave an indelible impression on our unit, a figure destined to be remembered in reverent whispers, his name etched into the very soul of our platoon, an eternal thread interwoven into our legacy. I'll never forget the first time I laid eyes on him. There was an undeniable presence about him, something that set him apart. He exuded a physical intensity, quiet yet commanding power that seemed to permeate the very air around him. He didn't need to speak. His mere existence altered the landscape, his movements evoking the strength and grace of a warrior from legend, an Achilles reborn. None of us could have imagined then the depth of his impact, the bonds he would form, or the way he would unite us as we faced the firestorm ahead. Yet to truly comprehend the enormity of his influence, we must trace his story back to its origins, for he was no ordinary individual. He was a force of nature, a comrade with unmatched resolve, a brother in arms, and a warrior whose like I have never encountered before or since. The Legend of Big Bear. In the cold, somber days of December 1950, Alfred Boyd, just 5 tender years old, was playing innocently with his friend near his modest home in Corpus Christi, Texas. The world, in all its vastness and complexity, was still a simple and wondrous place for Albert. He spoke eagerly to his friend about Christmas, a season of magic and joy. With bright eyes and a hopeful smile, he told his friend that Santa would be bringing him a shiny new bicycle with training wheels. He could already imagine himself riding it, the small bike wobbling slightly as it helped him learn to balance. A perfect starter for a boy his size. The lad spoke of it with the unshakable certainty that only a child can possess. Albert was a beautiful blend of heritages, Mexican, Irish, and Native American Indian, a lineage that many would say blessed him with the potential to grow into a strong and gifted young man, perhaps even a great athlete one day. Family lore says that when Albert was born, February 15, 1946, his grandfather, a Cherokee Indian, named him Big Bear, predicting the baby would have the heart and strength of a grizzly bear. Albert's grandfather must have seen the future as he gazed at his new grandson's little body. But on this day in December, he was just a little boy, full of dreams and delight filled with oversimple pleasures. He and his friend shared a curious treat they had discovered, mixing peanuts into their Coca-Cola to create a fizzy, sweet, and salty concoction. They laughed as the bubbles tickled their noses, their carefree world filled with the innocent joys of childhood. But innocence is fragile, and joy can be fleeting. The boys' laughter was suddenly silenced when a dark Ford sedan pulled up to the Boyd family home. Two solemn Marines stepped out of the car, their uniforms crisp but heavy with the burden of the duty they carried. The sight of them was enough to send a shiver through the air, a harbinger of heartbreak. Inside the house, Albert's parents received the news that no family ever wishes to hear. Albert's older brother, Albert, had been killed in the frozen hell of the Chosin Reservoir in South Korea, fighting against the relentless onslaught of communist Chinese forces. He had died a hero, but heroism offered little comfort to a family now shattered by grief. The news cast a dark, suffocating shadow over the Boyd household, a shadow that would linger far beyond that December. Albert, too young to fully grasp the weight of what had happened, watched as his home transformed before his eyes. The light seemed to drain from the rooms, replaced by a heavy, unbearable silence. The warmth of the season, the anticipation of Santa's visit, the promise of a new bicycle, everything was eclipsed by sorrow. His mother's tears fell like rain, and his father, a man Albert had always seen as strong and unyielding, now seemed smaller, bowed under the weight of his grief. Christmas that year barely came at all. The tree that Albert had helped decorate stood in the corner, its lights dimmed and its ornaments a painful reminder of a joy that felt out of reach. The bicycle Albert had dreamed of remained just that, a dream. For how could Santa come to a house so heavy with loss? How could there be celebration when his big brother, his hero, wasn't coming home? For little Albert, the concept of death was a difficult one to understand. He waited in his small way for Albert to return. Perhaps his brother was just running late to come home for Christmas, like when he'd been away at training before. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the truth began to settle in, a heavy weight on his young heart. Albert wasn't coming back. His laughter, his strength, his presence, they were gone, leaving behind only memories and an ache that words could never fully express. That fateful December, the Boyd family learned the cruel truth that war doesn't just claim lives on distant battlefields. It reaches into homes, tears apart families, and leaves scars that never truly heal. And for Albert, the little boy who had once been so excited for Christmas, the world would never again feel quite as magical. At the tender age of 11, Al Boyd stood tall as the ace pitcher for the Corpus Christi All-Star Little League team. This wasn't just any group of kids. They were a squad brimming with dreams of regional glory, their eyes firmly set on the championship prize. The only obstacle in their way? A scrappy, unassuming bunch from Monterrey, Mexico, going by the name Monterrey Industrial. To Al and his teammates, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. They'd steamroll this ragtag crew and march toward victory. After all, how could a team with industrial in their name be anything but a rusty old machine sputtering toward defeat. The series was set to be a two-game showdown. Game 1 ended with a gut punch. Corpus Christi lost by a decisive 5-0. But no one panicked. Why would they? Al Boyd, their golden-armed prodigy, had yet to take the mound. Al was Corpus Christi's secret weapon, their answer to every challenge, their ticket to glory. He was untouchable, undefeated, the kid who could throw pitches that made batters question their life choices. Confidence remained sky high. Game 2 would be the game, the one where Al would shut down Monterey Industrial's Cinderella story before it ever left the ballpark. But then came the heartbreak. Oh, the heartbreak. When the dust settled and the final out was called, the scoreboard read 6-0. Not for Corpus Christi, but for the scrappy boys from Monterey. Al stood on the mound, the sting of defeat cutting deeper than any fastball he'd ever thrown. It wasn't just a loss. It was a dagger to the soul of an 11-year-old competitor who had never tasted failure like this. And as if life hadn't twisted the knife enough, the Monterey Industrial squad went on to shock the world by winning the national title. Sure, their underdog triumph became a heartwarming legend for the ages, but try telling that to young Al, whose competitive fire burned a little brighter, albeit with the bitter taste of what could have been. Fun fact alert, if the name Monterey Industrial Little League Team rings a bell, it's probably because they're not just your average group of kids with baseball gloves and big dreams. Nope, this team actually made Little League history. In fact, their incredible journey was so inspiring that Hollywood came knocking and turned their story into a movie called The Perfect Game. Ever heard of it? If not, do yourself a favor and check it out. Trust me, it's a home run of a story that'll have you cheering from your couch. Just don't tell Big Bear. Back in the glory days of Roy Miller High School in Corpus Christi, Texas, a state practically synonymous with football greatness, there was a promising football player by the name of Al Boyd. If Texas is the land of Friday Night Lights and legendary gridiron stories, Al Boyd was writing his own chapter filled with grit, determination, and a touch of star power. Al's talent on the field earned him an induction into the school's Hall of Fame, a serious accolade in a state where football is practically a religion. That recognition opened the door to a shot at playing college football, setting the stage for a career packed with promise and a few unexpected twists. After leaving behind his high school glory days, Al embarked on his football journey at Henderson Junior College for his freshman season. It didn't take long for his combination of raw athleticism, dependable hands, and relentless work ethic to catch the attention of scouts and coaches alike. His hard work paid off when he secured a scholarship to the University of New Mexico. Al Boyd wasn't just another wide receiver, he was a dynamic playmaker with a future that seemed destined to shine under the big lights. And then came the phone call. Not just any call, mind you, but the call. On the other end of the line was a young, sharp-eyed assistant coach with a knack for spotting talent, Jimmy Johnson. Yes, that Jimmy Johnson, the Hall of Fame coach who would one day lead the Dallas Cowboys to Super Bowl glory and become a household name as a TV analyst. Back then, Johnson wasn't yet a football icon, but he clearly had an eye for talent. He told Al that the Wichita State could use a receiver of his caliber, and that transferring to Wichita State would not only elevate his game, but also bring him closer to home. The pitch worked. Al Boyd packed his bags and joined the charismatic Coach Johnson and the Shockers, ready for the next chapter in his football journey. At Wichita State, Al continued to make a name for himself with his signature blend of athleticism and determination. But life, as it often does, had other plans for the man nicknamed Big Bear. After college, Al took his talents to the Canadian Semi-Pro Football League, hoping to catch the eye of an NFL scout and fulfill his dream of playing professionally, just when it seemed his big break might be around the corner, life threw him a curveball in the form of a letter from Uncle Sam. Al Boyd had been drafted into the United States Army. Faced with an impossible choice, Al's coach suggested he consider applying for Canadian citizenship to avoid military service and keep his NFL dreams alive. But Al Boyd was more than just a talented athlete. He was a man of principle. To him, the idea of turning his back on his country was unthinkable. A proud American and patriot to his core, Al didn't just accept his draft notice, he embraced it. Without hesitation, he flew back to his hometown of Corpus Christi and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. If he was going to serve, he wanted to do so with honor, following in the footsteps of his brother as a Marine. Vietnam awaited, but so too did a chance to prove that Al Boyd's heart was just as big as his talent. In Vietnam, the name Al Boyd didn't ring many bells. To us, he wasn't Al Boyd. He was Big Bear, a mountain of a man, and easily one of the most unforgettable Marines in our unit. Sure, his physique was something to gawk at. He could have been plucked straight out of a Rambo poster, but it wasn't just about the bulging biceps or the fact that his muscles seemed to defy the jungle heat that melted most of us into walking puddles. Even after weeks in the field, when Big Bear would inevitably lean out, he was still a walking colossus, basically as big as two of us regular guys duct taped together. When Little John first laid eyes on Big Bear and his equally imposing sidekick, Chico, arriving at camp, he didn't just notice them, he announced them. The guy ran around our perimeter like Paul Revere on caffeine, shouting to anyone who'd listen that we'd officially won the war just by acquiring these two Goliaths. And honestly, for a brief, hopeful moment, we all kind of believed him. The legend of Big Bear only grew when he teamed up with Chico and Roger Morales, forming a trio of historic Hispanic machismo. They were like a walking recruitment poster, big, tough, and oddly photogenic. In contrast, there's a photo of me standing near Big Bear, and I looked like his scrawny kid brother. Harry Kushner, a.k.a. Boneyard, much wiser than me, was practically hiding behind the sandbags. But what made Big Bear truly stand out wasn't just his size or his strength. It was his heart. He became a natural leader in our unit, not because he demanded it, but because we wanted to follow him. Despite his towering stature, he carried not a trace of ego. He treated everyone, no matter how green or grizzled, with respect. The 4 or so years he had on most of us made him not just someone to look up to, but someone we trusted. He was the kind of guy you could confide in, whether it was about the war or the homesickness gnawing at your gut. Of all the tales that cemented his legendary status, 2 in particular stands out in my mind like it happened yesterday. The first was during a brutal patrol in the middle of monsoon season. The rain wasn't just falling, it was assaulting us, pounding the jungle with a ferocity only Mother Nature could muster. The ground beneath us had turned into a soupy, treacherous mess, slowing our progress to a miserable crawl. As the day dragged on, it became clear we might not make it back to our unit before nightfall, a dreaded prospect for anyone who's ever spent a night in the jungle. Then disaster struck. Carlos Baez, nicknamed Poncho, twisted his ankle crossing a riverbed. And I don't mean a little sprain you can walk off. The man couldn't take another step. We all looked at each other, silently asking the same question, what now? No medevac helicopter could land in this weather, let alone the vegetation surrounding us. That's when Big Bear stepped forward, calm as ever, and said, "You carry his gear, I'll carry Poncho." And just like that, he hoisted Poncho onto his back like the guy weighed no more than an empty rucksack. To say the trek back was grueling would be an understatement. We were slipping and sliding down muddy slopes, clawing our way up the next, all while the rain lashed at us like some furious, unrelenting beast. It was the kind of patrol that tested every ounce of your grit, and there was Big Bear, carrying a full-grown man on his back as if it were just another day at the office. We could hardly keep ourselves upright on that treacherous terrain, and yet Big Bear never faltered. Step by step, he carried Poncho all the way back to our night position. By the time we finally made it, we were soaked, exhausted, and utterly in awe of what we'd just witnessed. Even now, I can't fully wrap my head around how he did it. It was the kind of superhuman feat that turns men into legends. Story number 2. During one of our much-needed breaks from the jungle, we found ourselves back at Vandegrift Combat Base for some rest, as they say. The previous month had been a whirlwind, marked by an unforgettable and chaotic incident near Firebase Sierra. Let me set the scene. We were out on patrol, minding our own business, when the NVA suddenly appeared on a ridgeline, practically staring right at us. Naturally, all hell broke loose. Weapons were locked, loaded, and unleashed without hesitation. What we didn't realize, much to everyone's eventual dismay, was that another Marine patrol from Hotel Company was on a ridge behind them, just on the opposite side of where we'd spotted the NVA. What followed was the kind of confusion that could only happen in the fog of war. With the NVA caught smack in the middle, both our patrol and hotels started hammering away, bullets flying in every direction. It was chaos incarnate. Somewhere in the madness, a Marine from Hotel caught a round in the ankle. Word later trickled down that it was one of ours. How they would know that it was from us, I can't comprehend. Now Brian Bossong, for reasons I'll never fully understand, immediately decided it must have been his machine gun that fired the offending shot. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe Brian just had a flair for the dramatic. Who knows? Regardless, it was impossible to pin the blame on anyone specific. Everyone was lighting up the ridge like it was the 4th of July. Fast forward to a few days later. We were kicking back at the Enlisted Man's Club at Vandegrift, throwing back beers and swapping stories, when in walked a handful of Hotel Company Marines. The air instantly grew thick with tension. They were convinced we were the culprits behind their guy's ankle injury, and tempers started to flare. Voices were raised, looks were exchanged, fists were beginning to clench. It was about to turn into an all-out bar brawl when suddenly the door swung open and in walked Big Bear. Now Big Bear wasn't just a man, he was a presence. The kind of guy who could silence a room just by showing up. He took one look at the brewing storm and barked, "What's going on here?" in that gruff, no-nonsense tone of his. You could almost hear the collective gulp from the hotel boys. Without another word, they turned tail and left, vanishing like ghosts in the night. And Big Bear, cool as a cucumber, he strolled over, sat down, and cracked a beer like nothing had happened. The tension dissolved in an instant, replaced by uproarious laughter. That was Big Bear for you, a walking legend, a one-man peacekeeping force, and the kind of guy you wanted on your side no matter what. On September 1st, 1969, in the heart of Vietnam's chaotic battleground, Albert Big Bear Boyd stood as a steadfast Marine with our unit, embodying courage and honor. On that same day, his cousin, Sergeant First Class Jose Rodella, a valiant Army Green Beret, was making history of his own in Phuoc Long Province. For a staggering 18 hours, Rodella led his company through a ferocious onslaught. Despite suffering significant injuries himself, this extraordinary soldier displayed unwavering bravery, putting himself in harm's way to care for the wounded and skillfully neutralizing an enemy rocket position. Decades later, in recognition of his extraordinary valor, the long-overdue Medal of Honor was awarded to Big Bear's cousin by President Barack Obama following the passage of the Defense Authorization Act, which mandated a thoughtful review of Jewish American, African American, and Hispanic American veterans, ensuring that no deserving hero was overlooked. A proud Big Bear swiftly shared this remarkable news with his reunited comrades, inviting them to revel in the honor that swelled within his family. Undoubtedly, we rally alongside Al in this pride. Heroism flows through their family veins, and it's clear that Albert Boyd is a testament to the same noble legacy.